Retrogrades.
How to re-evangelize the de-Christianized West.
Support us in any way you can, most especially by your prayers.
From an authentically Catholic perspective.
Right-minded, righteous group that's equal in strength to the radicals.
From an authentically masculine perspective.
You and your friends versus me and my friends. Bring it on. Welcome to Rules for Retrogrades. I'm Tim Gordon with Chris and Dave. We're excited to bring you an exclusive interview with Mr. Quite Frankly, Frank, down in that screen right there. What's up, Frank?
What's going on, fellas? It's great to be here.
Yeah, all the way from New York, New York. City's so nice they named it twice, right?
That's right. We're combining the coasts here.
Yeah,
we are.
coast.
Yeah, if you
Thanks for being with us.
If you averaged our two coasts, we would be in the middle of the country. If we added them up and divided by two, we'd be wherever the exact, like Blaine, Missouri or something like that. Yeah, so we thought we would hit it again today with some current events. We've been doing topical shows here on Rules for Retrogrades recently. There's the mug. We're about to make this available to all, not just patrons. And we're going to do a Francis show. He's been on the move again, and we haven't covered Francis for a while. Got kind of almost out of fashion to cover Pope Francis in the Catholic media because at first people were like, I'm not sure this is happening. I'm not sure Francis really belongs in the news, even though he was doing things that were noteworthy. Then last year, the year before that, many personalities started covering Francis, and now again, people are kind of they're almost over it, aren't they, Frank?
Yeah, it's almost like beating a dead horse at this point. I think that and it's called a lot of attention to this because, for one, I mean, you know me, it's one of those things where I think the current events is actually waking people up to all the things that they might have cast off in the past, whether it be their religious regimens, going to church, what they've just been able to, I don't know, whatever, just rationalize away. And one of the things that's called everybody's attention to this stuff is that who's praising the Pope and who's upset with the Pope. And when you have people like Michael Moore or even Bernie Sanders, they're like, this guy's good. He's good. He's got a good head on his shoulders. That makes you really wonder. So I think that the media that this man attracts at the Vatican has really made people think and maybe thinking in ways that many of us haven't done in a while. And I think I probably represent that common man in a way where I'm slowly being, reined back into this by way of the media coverage here.
Yeah, going back to church because the Pope.
It's true. Think about it. Think about it. That's really what it's like.
Well, there's a lot going on. It kind of feels like you wake up every day and you want to know what the headline's going to be or if there's been some major catastrophe. So we're kind of at a weird time in the church. It keeps us glued to our seat and looking forward in terms of what's going to be coming down the pike, but maybe not in a good way, in a bad way, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, the one thing that got me, and I know that you fellows wanted to talk about it today, so I might as well just broach the topic, was of the recent things was this whole idea of ecological sin and how the Pope wants to like actually make this a thing and bring it into the church's teachings about ecological sin. And we already have gone on, and Tim and I have spoken about this in the past, and I know that he's spoken about it with a lot of other of his co-hosts and guests too, about the environmentalism and this UN Agenda 2030 that has so blatantly found its way into everything that is being done, especially under this Pope, that it's brought me back to, actually, because he keeps bringing up Hitler and the Nazis, it's brought me back to what was actually going on in Nazi Germany, not only with their green movement, but with the way that they adapted Christianity to be able to actually prop up the Reich. And that, of course, that was called positive Christianity, where the Fuhrer was pretty much taking on the savior role as a new revelation, and it's all very, very eerily similar, almost as if we're inching toward that again.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. I mean, the 2030 thing, I remember I did that show with Taylor on my birthday morning. And it was the show that I think I did the most research ever for, of all the 110 shows we did last year in 2018, early 2019. It's remarkable stuff, and it all is related back to the environment. Yeah, I mean, so when I woke up late last week and saw Francis is weighing adding ecological sin to the Catechism, this is remarkable in ways that are heretofore they were still unprecedented even after the 2030 thing. Like, for instance, he's talking about, it's not just a revisitation of Laudato Si, the 2015 encyclical, which really everyone didn't know what to think about it. He seems to be going back to it more and more the last 4 months or so. But he also is making a sin out of violations against our communal home. This is remarkable. Not too many people have talked about it. Chris, you should weigh in here. The issue is personal sin, right? Before in all of the Catechism, you can't sin against the environment. You can't sin against a person or against God.
Well, Jesus made a little tree wither. So it's like, obviously Jesus didn't sin against the earth when he made the tree wither. That's a huge point. I was trying to figure out yesterday. I teach moral theology here, and it can get pretty technical. And I'm trying to think of, how could you sin against the earth? I was like, you're always sinning against a person, either God or another fellow human being. You could indirectly, I mean, if you blow up your neighbor's home, you could sin against your neighbor, not necessarily against the home. So I don't know how he's gonna make this work. It'll be interesting to see. But it is interesting, starting with Laudato Si and then to now. It just sort of like going with this globalist agenda, which is, it's so interesting. It's like the one moral issue that they all agree on, not abortion. It's just like they found that one thing that they can unite around and just drive it home, do everything they can to make that the issue.
And tracking, I was just going to say, there's nothing particularly new or sexy about the notion that, we have a duty to be good stewards of the earth, right? This is something you've seen in the pontificates of especially John Paul II and Benedict XVI. But what's new here, I think, for the listeners, it's important to point out, is that we're almost anthropomorphizing earth. We're making it so that you can sin against an inanimate object. Why we have a duty to care for creation and to care for our common home, always traditionally in the church, has been because we have a duty to care for God and then man. It's that twofold commandment: love God with all your heart, and then to love man as yourself, right? So that's the traditional basis for it. But this is a little bit of a new something. It's a sleight of hand, because now we're making it almost like there's an inanimate object that we can offend against, rather than offending, harming our common home, and that offending both God and our fellow man. So I think that's what's at stake here.
Well, I'd love to piggyback onto that there too, because when Tim was kicked this off by saying can you sin against the environment? Is it really, or do you sin against individuals, or do you sin as an individual? But I think that this is really just one of those things that reaffirms that the whole point here is to get rid of the individual. And, it's well-known fact that all of these environmental fanatics, all they really care about, they don't care about anything as it pertains to matters of liberty, and they gladly surrender all of their liberty to tyrants for promises of either economic sustainability or any kind of sense of security out there. So that keeps playing on over and over again. And I love the anthropomorphization of things as well, where you have people who are looking out there. There are those out there who will benefit from this environmentalism stuff, It's a quote that a saying I love keeping close by me whenever we start talking about this stuff. But socialism is for the people, not the socialist. The socialist lives a lavish lifestyle. So I remember when I was a kid, my brother Anthony and I were, I remember one day we were hanging out with some mutual friends, and I didn't have a bike. My brother had a bike that day. Everybody else was on bikes. I didn't want to be on foot. So I told my brother, I said, listen, Ant, I said, I don't know how old we were. I said, listen, you should let me use your bike. If you are the one jogging alongside of us, your muscles are going to get so big. You're going to get strong and all that stuff. And he said, oh, he really, I could convince him. So I got on his bike and we're all walking around. And every 5 minutes I said, Anthony, flex your arm. Let's see it. And he would flex his arm and he goes, wow. Like, yeah, dude, you're getting bigger, And it's just one of those things. I made off with the bike. He's getting tired. It's the same thing over and over again. And that's why I said it concerns me when I see that, this environmentalism, the Agenda 2030 stuff, this anthropomorphizing, to hell with that word. But among the topics that are obviously extreme interest to the Pope, and it's like you see that he's almost trying to adapt the church to the EU and the UN's charter, whereas in the past we have seen regimes adapt the church to their particular national governments. Now it's just going global.
Quite frankly, you heard it here first. Pope Francis took his bike. That's he tricked us into taking our common bike. This is what he said. We have to introduce, we're thinking about it, to the Catechism of the Catholic Church, the sin against ecology, the ecological sin against our common home, because a duty is at stake, Pope Francis told his hearers. Let me read from you, Catholic author, Dr. Peter Kwasniewski. This guy's pretty based. He says, there's no possible sin against planet Earth. All sins are all sins are ultimately against God or those who are in God's image. As all theologians have explained prior to the post-conciliar decline of theology, when we abuse the natural world or plants or animals, we are sinning against God, their creator, who gave them to us to use for the right purposes and in accordance with their nature and ours. The only targets of sin are persons, since they are either divine persons, like Chris said, or who deserve our total obedience, or angelic or human persons who deserve our reverence as images of God. So, does someone want to react to this? Basically, Frank, you opened up talking about Agenda 2030, staggering stuff. The only people that like what's happening, catechetically, I guess you could call it theologically, though I don't think the theology does change. The only people that like it are the George Soros, Peter Singer types, Jeffrey Sachs, right? There's basically no Catholics anymore that are serious-minded that support this. I'm just throwing this out there.
Yeah, I think the subtlety of kind of crafting a new sin, like I said, this is nothing revolutionary in terms of saying, we shouldn't be like chopping down the rainforest and having huge tire fires and, dumping toxic waste into the ocean, right? That's already part of our teaching, saying you have a duty to care for. Right, I know, definitely. Why is it important enough for the progressives in the church? I think this would be the fundamental question for everybody to answer. Why is it important enough for the progressives in the church to change the catechism in this subtle way, where now you can offend against like Mother Nature herself, as opposed to saying, yeah, take care of the environment where you can, make good and renewable use of it, but there's no sin against the environment itself. What is the importance of that subtle shift?
You guys, you mentioned the rainforest, Dave, and that brought something up else for me, where this has been a major point of contention for me on my own show as well, and that is, the concept of conservationism has been hijacked, and that in itself needs to be reclaimed. Just like it gets back to, are we talking about an individual, or are we talking about a scheme to collectivize consciousness itself here? If you're talking about looking around your natural habitat, your local home, whatever it is, you want to get like this Greta Thunberg character that was paraded around the globe. Was she where did she? Nobody asked where she came from. Nobody asked what she was talking about. She didn't become famous because she organized her fellow students to leave school one day on a strike to go and jump into their local rivers and streams and clean up their brooks and clean up things like that and all that. No, they all went out there and tried putting pressure on adults to start taxing the world. So when you think about what is taking care of our home here, our collective home here, really all about, and how do we reclaim that and say, no, we don't want the rainforest to be burned down. We don't want to see seals getting clubbed so, everybody can go out and have something nice to wear.
Wait, you don't?
Town. No, I haven't worn seal fur in a while.
What are you wearing?
Well,
then?
we can agree to disagree. So
this is just my Christmas vacation shirt, the Clark Griswold shirt.
Oh,
but
nice.
sealskin shirt.
But it's the same thing. It's like with the war on drugs. The war on drugs is and was an abject failure. But inside the war on drugs, Just Say No. You guys remember Just Say No?
Definitely.
Just Say No was
90s.
good. Yeah, you give people there's no harm is done in giving people information and hoping that they act as responsible adults in an individual way. Just Say No is fine. But this heavy-handed approach to everything that is now we're seeing is getting married with faith it's scary enough when faith isn't involved. But
total aside here, did you guys see South Dakota's new anti-drug schema? It's what is it, meth? We're on it. I don't know if that was just a blunder, but it came out yesterday and everybody's just making fun of it.
No.
So they're now no longer anti-drug. They're just openly admitting they're on meth.
Right. Right.
Let me throw something. Let me throw something else out there. When you read the biblical narrative, we have to keep in mind that the earth oftentimes doesn't like us. The earth, like in the Old Testament, in the New Testament, the earth itself has rebelled against the sons of God precisely because they have rejected God. We see this multiple, and on top of that, the earth is cursed. The earth is cursed by God in Genesis 3. So eventually, God is going to restore the earth. He's going to bring about a new creation, Revelation 21 and 22. We also see this in Romans 8. But the reason why the earth has rebelled or rejected man is precisely because man has broken the moral law of God. And so the earth doesn't want to bring forth its fruit. The earth doesn't want to provide us with, X, Y, and Z, precisely because it has rejected its creator. So it's not turning the earth into Mother Earth. It's just a poetic way for the biblical authors to say that the reason why the earth itself has been subjected to futility is because earth's representatives, the ones that have been made in the image and likeness of God, have rejected God himself.
Speaking of anthropomorphizing Earth, you're like,
well, I mean,
the Earth is mad at you, bro. No, it's true. I mean, we were talking about this watching Last of the Mohicans the other time. Like, his was really kind of quixotic and silly about romanticism. Like, man is born free and everywhere else in chains. And, we're talking about Hawkeye returning to nature and it's, there's this glorious picture of what his life is like after having returned to nature. Well, that's not real. I mean, that's not real at all. Like, these characters like Jeffrey Sachs and his homie, Pope Francis, he's been hanging out with Pope Francis since the summer of 2015 in the Vatican. All these guys, Peter Singer, that want to give to animals human personal rights. That it's not a friendly place. I mean, I'm not trying to sound like a naturalist, like frickin' Jack London over here, but the earth isn't necessarily our friend. It's not a person, for starters.
Getting deep.
Yeah.
No, yeah, consciousness, man. Consciousness and ego are a huge it's a huge player. Being able to reckon with the human ego is I think it's very important to try to separate that from everything else. It's almost like trying to identify whether or not You have like I've grown up, and I knew very early on what anxiety felt like, and to finally learn that the difference between a heart attack and an anxiety attack is great, because then okay, well, at least I'm not dying, and I can just breathe through this. But that's just the ego always at play, and when you've crowned yourself, when we tend to crown ourselves as the highest achievement of anything, that we're infallible in our own our own perception of everything, that even that goes too far, perhaps just because on a conscious level we are very, very special products of creation, but at the same time we can still take that self-actualization process way too far, and then all of a sudden see us in the center of every little story, that the earth itself bends to us, and that's where we so that self-control is one of those things that's the hardest thing to attain. And even just the self-control to look at ourselves in the mirror in a little bit more responsible ways, and maybe that's where the relationship between us and our surroundings starts getting a little bit more tempered.
Yeah. There's something else to all of this. When we tend to idolize the environment, tend to idolize Mother Earth, what we're doing is also degrading the human condition. We're degrading our own dignity. So, the church is taught, if you look up like in the Catechism about animal abuse, it says in there that in a way, if you're abusing an animal, if you're abusing the environment, it's an affront against human dignity. So when we start talking about the earth as if it's this sentient being, as if it has its own dignity, not in relation to God and man, because obviously the earth was created as a pleasure park for God. Eden was created as a pleasure park for God, that man had the duty and the honor and the dignity of tending for him, right? So, there's this twofold dignity, and it all is very theocentric. Man has dignity in that we share in the image and likeness of God, and creation has dignity in that it's created to reflect the glory and goodness of God. So when we start talking about the earth as if it has its own dignity, what it really is a subtle attack on the glory of God and the inherent dignity of man. You guys agree?
Yeah,
I do.
I like that pleasure park business. Makes me want to go to Disneyland. Sorry, Frank.
No, Splash Mountain
with roller coasters. Cool. Right.
I think that plays into the other thing there too, with the individualism point again. There, I like how I like that the idea of us being not masters of the world, but stewards. Stewards of the world, where we should be the ones taking care of things around us, and being grateful for where we are, and being grateful for life itself. And in that respect, that is where it runs completely in the opposite direction of what the modern day prescription for any kind of environmental crisis that is real or imagined is actually presented to us with. We're told that you don't need to be the ones that goes outside with the rake or with the stick with the nail at the end of it and clean up a local park. All you got to do is vote for the right person. They will take your tax money and they'll give it to somebody else who'll go out and do it for you. And in that respect, we start becoming more and more separated from what I think Dave has brought up here as a personal responsibility that we should take on gladly. And the more we're separated from these responsibilities, the more detached we are from maybe what the reality of the situation always was.
Also, theologically, what's been under attack throughout this entire Francis pontificate is dignity, the concept of dignity. You see an outstripping of it, and at the very best, well, I don't even believe this, a misunderstanding of what human dignity is. It's a constituent of will and intellect in Pope Francis's attack on dignity, attack on the death penalty in the name of dignity. You see an attack on dignity or a misunderstanding of it, if I'm to pay forward the benefit of the doubt here, when we talk about animals as or the earth as being capable in a likewise fashion as to humans of taking umbrage, right? Receiving sins there against. Where else was it? I had a third example in mind. Dignity accrues uniquely to persons, like Dr. Peter Kwasniewski said in this article, human persons, angelic persons, or the sui generis divine person, three divine persons, one triune God. It's a function of intellect and will coupled together. This is what makes us able to speak of, like Dave said, any of the constituents of sentiency, right? You can't take umbrage unless you're a person. Yes. So the point is that all plants and animals are ours to head up and to use responsibly, et cetera, et cetera. But except this is not the vision that UN Agenda 2030, that Jeffrey Sachs, the George Soros operative, that any of the REPAM operatives at the Shamazon City we just finished with, the worldwide globalists have to pitch. I don't think because they care about plants or animals. This is how you accumulate power, is by pitching non-personal items as persons. It seems to be central to what they're doing geopolitically.
Yeah, I think so, and I think, honestly, we haven't used the term yet, but there's no avoiding it in a conversation like this. Let's face it, a lot of this is rooted in the push for carbon regulation and the fight against so-called global warming, and this pontificate's seeming embrace, or explicit embrace, of the shaky science behind the idea of global warming, which, of course, I think we all see, even if you were to buy into the science behind global warming, which I personally don't. I know, Tim, you don't. It's very dubious. But even if one were to buy into the science, and I reject it at this point, behind global warming, I think a lot of it's a Trojan horse to get progressives in control of all these national economies and kind of these super governmental agencies to control national economies, so we can be headed more towards, in a way, one world governance
and to push abortion.
Yeah,
well, Francis
because
called
it's the
for
perfect.
Francis used the term one world government at the end of the summer, right? And the 2030 agenda makes some explicit references there too. So this is not conjecture.
And Chris's point, Chris, why don't you just drop the abortion connection, because there's population control.
It's population control. Yeah, there are too many people. This is why if you get pregnant, you got to have an abortion. It just pushes all these agendas when you idolize it. I mean,
You're not suggesting that. You said if you get pregnant, you got to have. This is what.
No. Yeah. That's what they said. Never, of course.
Yeah. No, I'm kidding. Mainly, I'm having fun with you.
Gotta be your bowl.
Yeah, no,
it's gotta be your bowl. Yeah.
That situation there too is also confusing to me as to why people aren't starting to put two and two together with that as well. You say population control. The world's population is exploding. Meanwhile, the population in Western civilization is collapsing. Right. So you look at it, and of course, the same people who are selling us all of the concepts that we're talking about today are also, they've staked their claim over the concept of, or over the power of determining whether or not you're a racist, whether or not you're some kind of a bigot or a phobic of one thing or another. It's just, they have staked claim on all of these terms. At the same time, though, they are talking out of both sides of their mouth that the world the population is exploding, which means that more people, the population is exploding, but at the same time, the population the West is collapsing. So they don't want to admit that in all of the brown countries, they are exploding. In the Western countries that they've already convinced people to accept feminism, they've accepting all of this nihilist view of the world that we have to, through the environmentalism, once again, for the environment, don't have children. For the environment, some leftist intellectuals in Europe are suggesting eating people now. We already know that people are starting to get more and more encouraged to eat crickets and bugs. Like we're Renfield. It's like Yeah, seriously, it's one big Dracula film, the whole thing. So I don't know how that it doesn't play out because they don't want to admit. They don't want to admit. And it's even crazier to say that we need to save the world by making the people who are already not reproducing reproduce less.
Look at what Uju says. The Catholic African woman. She says, we don't want, she's half the time, I think, addressing Pope Francis, we don't want your cultural colonialization, which is powerful when you get an African woman saying, we have our problems. We do not need the problems of the West, problems with a culture of death, abortion, contraceptive mindset. This is nonsense. We don't want it. Keep it there. And that's also what the UN is pushing. Conditioning grants, conditioning money to South America and Africa. I think this is what REPAM and the Amazon Synod was also all about. The connection between the culture of death and world domination, and thirdly, paganism. It's a triplicate that the 20th century. It's a lesson. It should have instructed well. I don't think we've taken that lesson. I mean, this triplicate: culture of death, paganism, world domination. They seem to go together. And Francis seems to be the point man, running the point here, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, and we're so cocky. You know, there's a great deal of arrogance that goes with trying to outsource our sick, perverse Western culture to some of these third world countries. There's a sort of monetary superiority attitude going on there. Yeah, we're a first world country. We have computers, and I have 10 pairs of pants in my closet, and I have 2 cars in my garage. Therefore, I'm going to outsource my sick, unhealthy culture and displace your actually quite healthy culture. Whether it's India, where they're preserving the traditional family, traditional gender roles, having lots of kids, and these sort of values. And it's like, well, because we have a lot of money, we're going to give you our sick culture of death. I mean, it takes a real... Other people have to hate us because that's pretty arrogant.
Because the church is universal, you see this played out in this very real way. When the African bishops, they'll show up to a synod, and what'll be on the agenda are just Western problems. It's like LMNOP issues. They're in Africa. They're like, we're not dealing with that. They're like, well, we want women to be more involved in the church. It's like, that's not an issue for us in Africa. Well, we want X, Y, and Z, and the African bishops show up, and they're like, this has nothing to do with us.
Yeah.
And because you already see the church is already universal. And so a lot of when these Western countries get together, you can really see it's just a Western thing. But in the church, when you have bishops coming from all over the world, then you start to see this interesting dynamic play out.
Yeah, I mean, think about the interesting dynamic we just saw play out in the Amazon Synod, right? We don't really understand when anytime Bishop Kreitler would open his mouth and say, yeah, we really need women deacons and married priests in the area to help us evangelize. Well, how much have you evangelized, Bishop Kreitler? Well, I've never baptized a single person.
We don't evangelize. It's like, wait, didn't you just say?
That doesn't work well when you're speaking out both sides of your mouth. It's hard to do.
It is imperative that we get homosexual priests and women to evangelize. Like, really? Oh, when did you plan on doing evangelization? Never. We don't want
Never.
to.
Why
do you ask?
Well, you can't receive the Eucharist unless you're baptized, right? So I don't know who they're giving the Eucharist to when they get priests down there. So
it's like my parish down the street with Susan from the parish council. Frank, do you know Susan from the parish council?
Was that your first guest? Did you guys have her on as a guest? Is
yeah. She is
what's that?
Yeah, so she's a big Twitter fan, Frank. You gotta follow Susan from the parish council on Twitter, my man. She's a boomer woman, symbolic. She's a figurehead for all the boomers out there.
That picture that you guys put up on screen, that was really her?
No.
Because I was wondering, is this her?
No. Susan is everywhere. We say Susan is a parody account.
She's in all of us.
Yeah, so
Okay.
Susan's she's the boomer lib in
Okay.
everyone's parish. All right, and
She's yeah. Go ahead.
her Twitter account's bigger than mine, and she started like a year ago. So we were like, that would be hilarious. You know, she would interact with TNT, but I'm like, we want to be the first one to interview her. Actually, our first interview was with Mr. Buster Douglas, who knocked down Mike Tyson in
They didn't kill him.
92.
Like that's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of Susan. It reminds me of that memed out character that I love, Karen, the stereotypical woman who walks into the store and asks to speak to the manager. You know, oh God, we have another Karen now. You know, but I love Karen and Susan. The lib
People are calling
boomer.
them Susans. Yeah, the lib boomer. Everyone calls them Susans now. I mean,
Everything we've always hated about. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's everything everyone hates about the post-conciliar church.
Modern parish life. Susan is everything. She's the personification of everything that's wrong with modern parish life. She is Pan de Vida incarnate. You know,
She tweeted out a few days ago. She said, responding to someone who was kind of making fun of the ecological sins. She said, she makes a good point here. Honor your father and mother. Mother Earth, hello.
Yeah, that was great. I saw that.
I remember because when you guys premiered that episode, and I'm sitting here, I think it was on a Saturday afternoon. I'm watching it, and I'm sitting back, and you know, my day is done. I had cleaned the bathroom. I did my workout for the morning. I felt good. I'm sitting back, and I see that you guys went live, and I'm watching the premiere. And I'm saying to myself, you know, what? I didn't know if it was a joke or not, because you had this woman talking about, I think what it was. There really is no rules. I mean, there's no rules. Everything is up in the air. I'm listening to this subjectivity nonsense. It is just all. It's the Frankfurt School.
Did you think it was real? Did you think it was real, or you knew it was a parody?
No. I thought it was real because, and you know, guys, here, this is the reason why I say we're living in dangerous times. I was talking last night with Carpe Donctum on my show. He makes tons of very viral memes. The president retweets them all the time. And, you know, when I talk to a comic or anybody that deals in parody, it usually comes around to the point of the conversation when you say, you know, I think what is so disturbing about where we are right now is that we are living out where we used to go to for parody, where we used to run to make parody of everything and go to the caricature extremes of everything is now reality. So when I hear something that would be so outrageous to us in like the 90s, I don't know off the bat if it's real or not.
Everybody thought we were like literally laughing at some old lady.
Me too.
They just keep laughing at her.
But if it was real though, if you guys were laughing, I'm sitting there going, I wasn't like, oh, I can't believe they're laughing at this old lady. I was laughing too. I was like, I can't believe this woman actually exists.
Yeah, that's the thing, man. It's a great way to introduce the next point. We've been talking about this for the last week and a half. Is so many friends, not just people that we are loosely acquainted with, but friends, ex-students of mine, were listening to the Susan from the Parish Council interview, going like, man, this lady is kind of being rude to you, and you're kind of being rude back. We can't. We're in clown world. We're in clown world, Frank, and we can't get out. You can't tell. I mean, this whole Francis pontificate is clown world. You can't listen to this next headline, right? And this came on the heels a month after the last Scalfari interview. This guy, Eugenio Scalfari, he's a 95-year-old journalist. He runs La Repubblica. They used to shove La Repubblica free papers, this Marxist smut rag, in my face on La Linea A when I lived in Rome. It's garbage then, it's garbage now. And Pope Francis has given 7 interviews to this guy, and it sounds like farce. You might as well be taking Susan from the Parish Council literally. Pope Francis denies the physical resurrection of our Lord from the dead in a November 5th interview for La Repubblica. Scalfari is taking this from a book he's compiled, interviews with Pope Francis and with Cardinal Martini, the Don of the Sankt Gallen Mafia. It's called The One God in Modern Society. Scalfari is a committed atheist. He doesn't even take notes in his interview. He reconfigures them by his memory. And a month before, he'd done an interview with Pope Francis where Pope Francis is essentially saying that he's an Arianist, and that he doesn't believe Jesus, while he was human, was part of the Trinity. What do you do with this? And I mean, literally, there are still outfits out there, centrist and, of course, far left Catholic outfits, that want us to just take this seriously and whistle past the graveyard. What do you do? It's stranger than fiction. I'm done. I'm putting down my nose.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I will speak from a standpoint like you guys. I consider you guys, especially you, Tim, because we've spoken for months now at this point. A theologian, I am not, and a perfect man, I am not, and I am just starting to feel all the old roots of mine get rekindled, all the nostalgia of faith that my grandparents had. I think I find comfort in living even just vicariously through the faith that I saw them living so fully, and they were that's why even into their last years on earth, they were so calm about things, because there was just something they didn't have the anxieties that people who are just living day by day and untethered really had, and that makes me feel comfortable, especially with all the anxiety and stuff. But I will say, especially between this and the interviews, because I've seen other interviews like this that have come out that were, what were other ones? Not just the resurrection. What were other things that came out of this particular interviewer recently?
There's like 9.
There are no souls in hell. Souls that would be punished to hell just cease to exist.
Just
was
to
one.
blink out.
Yeah, there's all of them that he does with Scalfari always go the exact same way. Hold on, you're making me try to get fast recall. I had 4 or 5 of them in my head right now. They always, the Vatican never does a full denial. They keep going back to Scalfari. I've known who he was since I lived in Rome in 2007. What are the other topics? I forget.
Arianism, the Christ is subordinate to the Father, essentially. Yeah, that was the other most recent one, right, guys?
Yeah, it was a month ahead of time.
Was the purgatory thing?
What, Chris?
You remember was he the one that said purgatory is not a place too?
I think that was one of the earliest Scalfari interviews. Yeah, and they've been friends for years, by the way. They've been friends for years. He keeps going back to him, right? I mean, with the kind of abnegation culture where you are called upon, particularly as a conservative, you have to disown, disavow. Disavowal culture is big, right? Oh, you're not allowed to have this friend. Pope Francis keeps going to Eugenio Scalfari, this crazy old 95-year-old Marxist atheist who runs La Repubblica, and he doesn't even take notes. And they never do a full repudiation. When they ask, look, guys like us, we don't have mouthpieces, right? If I say something, or you say something, or any of us say something on our show that's errant, we'll be run out of town on a rail. But Francis, being a VIP, an important world leader, and the only real theological leader in the world that matters, if he says something wrong, all he does is he trots out, Vatican communications director, and they say, this isn't what he meant, here's what he meant. Each time that Scalfari produces one of these interviews, they play the weaponized ambiguity game, and they just say, well, this isn't a direct quote. That's all they say. They don't
Right.
repudiate.
Well, can you get us one?
It's a scandal.
Right.
It's a scandal. If you say these things, that, or if there's a report, I mean, you're in this high and lofty position, right? You are the visible head of the church on earth. If there is a report that you are speaking abject heresy, then you have a grave duty to get out there in front of this and say, look, I'm not saying this. This is a scandal to the faithful. I repudiate these reports. I've never said any such thing. It's a hateful notion that I would say this thing. And here's what I believe, and it's totally in accordance with this, which is what the church believes. Because this has become a stumbling block for the faithful. It's become an occasion for apostasy and heresy to creep into the church. So if you are even if you're not the source of scandal yourself, say Pope Francis didn't really say these things, as the Vatican press releases are kind of hinting at in this really ambivalent way, right? But if he didn't really say these things, then that doesn't absolve him from the situation. His name and his office, the Petrine office, has been brought into this. It's been dropped into this. So he has a duty now to come and rescue his office and his good name from this, even if it wasn't his fault in the first place, which I think the steady torrent of these stories that keeps dropping every few months that is a source of, distress to the faithful, I think that suggests otherwise. At first, I think there's a duty to avoid rash judgment and to be like, okay, some quack is saying that the Pope doesn't believe that the eternal word is of the same substance as the Father. Some quack journalist is saying that, the Son didn't rise bodily, even though, this has always been one of the ways we describe the Eucharist, is it's the crucified and risen flesh of the Lord. These were kind of the code words in the early church to preserve orthodoxy about this thing. Some journalist is saying that the Pope doesn't believe these things. Whatever, there's lots of nuts out there, right? I think we all wanted to give that kind of deference to the Holy Father and to the office at first, right? I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think that's just good Christian avoidance of rash judgment. This is like 10 times, and there's never been a really great denial, and there's a pattern emerging. So at this point, we're like, yeah, or I'm like, yeah, this is a credible report, and there's a real hell of a problem brewing for us, or already pre-brewed.
Yeah, let's conclude by saying this. There's never been a repudiation. This is one of the closest journalist friends of Pope Francis. He's never repudiated what he said. And it's actually not rash judgment to say to read the news. It's rash judgment to read the news now and to say, oh, this journalist who's closer friends with Francis than any of the Catholic journalists that we read daily in the Catholic news media.
Right.
Pope Francis said this.
Saying that it's rash judgment on.
No.
Saying at the beginning, we are trying to avoid it, right?
Sure. But I mean, so to just zoom out and close the story, and I know Chris has got to run. I've got to run. We've got to run to work. There's nothing like this, because I got in a conversation like this recently with a church friend. It's like, dude, this is the news. This is how the news works, man. This journalist gets cush priority interviews with Francis, sit-down interviews, book interviews, like Peter Sievold with Pope Benedict. And he gets the prime angle, and he's served it up on a platter. And they never repudiate that Pope Francis is an Arianist or a resurrection denier or a hell denier or any of these other things. Purgatory was one of the first stories, Frank. You heard that right? Yeah. But I mean, yeah. So we had other Francis news we were gonna get to, but I know Chris has got to run. I've got to run. We'll have to bring you back on some other time, Frank. I always enjoy talking to you, and I'm glad you could meet my homies here.
Oh, it was great meeting both of you guys. It was fantastic. I loved hanging out with Chris and Dave and you, Tim. We've been doing this a while. We didn't get to the Moloch statue, but it's I think it's just more of all the same. I'd be happy to come back whenever you want.
Yeah, you should. I mean, Moloch statue in front of the Colosseum. Let's depress everyone in their day by saying that the stories are all. It was a little hard to research. Final thought here. There's a giant Moloch statue, almost as tall as the Colosseum itself, and the permissions allegedly had to come through the Vatican to put Moloch, the child sacrificial god of the Canaanites, in front of the Colosseum.
Almost as tall as Alex, or Alex. What's his name? Alexander, who's like 6'8". The guy.
Teshiguel? Yeah. That guy's. When he was standing next to Taylor, I thought he was standing on a chair or something. He's really, really tall. Did you see that the idol dunker Alexander Teshiguel?
No,
he threw at the Amazon synods. He threw the little stupid statues into the Tiber River. It was bait.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah.
I think we even talked about that.
Yeah,
The Moloch statue's too big, though. He's not going to be able to just throw that off.
He's going to need some help.
No.
He's going to need a hoe for that one. But
We
listen,
need ginger strength for that. We'll send Chris.
And I know we're getting off. So let me also just say, when it comes to this, when it comes to the environmentalist stuff, when we talk about all the political machinations that have been injected into the church's operation, and of course the head of the church, but when as far as what people are noticing, I can tell you, I'm coming from a different side of the street, letting you know that it is very obvious now to people who aren't even aren't practicing any religion, that there is a line being drawn in the sand. And Christianity, in particular, is this satanic movement's chief target. There is no doubt about it. Whether or not there's something going on out there, it's the chief target. These people, the Marxist infiltrators of the Roman Catholic Church especially, they're not looking to bust the spiritual kneecaps of people who believe in Mother Earth and who believe in the universe at large or anything like that. They're coming in a very pointedly sacrilegious way, in an anti-Christian way, and it's making a lot of people wonder about it. And it's important because Christianity, whether you like it or not, is responsible for the civilization that we're watching sputter right now. And it's happening so much that people are asking the question. And for me, I think that this naked emergence of downright evil in many ways has also made me say to myself, well, if I ever had my doubts, if the demonic is real, and we're seeing that right now, then the holy must be real too. Because, what had been keeping this now apparent evil operating secretly in the shadows for as long as it had been, if not a diametrically opposed force that was at one time stronger and has now been neutered in some way. So it's making people think. It definitely is making me think, and I'm glad that you guys invited me onto your show.
That's always awesome. Informs, man. Always informs of evangelization. Yeah, I grew up with my doubts in the 90s and early 2000s too, but there's a reason that it's the one true faith. And that's why the infiltrators infiltrate there. They don't care about all the primitive religions or the Eastern religions. It's the one true faith. It's the one thing. Stalin knew this, almost
Hitler,
100 years ago.
Hitler. They
hated the church because they knew it's the one true faith. They knew Big Bang Theory, quantum mechanics. They proved the church correct, according to Stalin. So that's why they're afraid of it. And I'm just saying, Frank, you're a good man. We love you on Rules for Retrogrades. You got about 15 TLM masses near a dozen or 15. I was looking last night right near you. So you have an easier time getting to a Tridentine Latin mass. The beautiful liturgy of the church. This is what brings people back in. You got so many more around you than I do with me, man. I traveled 2 hours.
You don't have to deal with Susans all day.
No,
There's no Susans there.
No Ponte Vita.
Go to the Tridentine Latin mass, Frank. I'll be proud of you. I'll send you a Alex Rodriguez rookie card or something. You go back.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
Oh, I can start talking like Alex Rodriguez.
It'll just be his Topps rookie card, but yeah, dude, we want you to do it. But it's great. I love having your analysis. I love the mix of the theopolitics. So, look, we're gonna have to call it there because Chris has got to run. I've got to run, but we'll talk to you again soon, brother.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thanks absolutely. And get in touch whenever you need anything. I'm always around. Thanks a lot, guys.
All right. Thank you.
Likewise, bro.
Bye-bye.
Peace.
See ya.
Bye, Frank. So we'll call it there. Everyone have a good day and a good week, and we will be back with another episode in 2 days.
All right. Peace.